I was working on my latest creation and I had my box of miniature tubing out, and I thought I'd share something with you that I picked up during my time with the Canadian Knife Makers Guild. So most model shops have a little metal rack that carries copper, brass, and aluminum. You can get these in a variety of different shapes and sizes, circles, squares, C-channel angle iron, you know, like I said, copper, brass, and aluminum. And they're about a foot long, and you just got to spend a little time in there, and if you piece them together to find combinations that fit together, then we can fill them up with epoxy and actually make mosaic pins. Now what a mosaic pin is basically a pin with a picture on it. And again, this is just little pieces that I stood inside the model shop fitting together and then brought them all home and epoxied them together. Now the drawback with this type of pin is you can't peen it, because if you start peening it, you're going to ruin your pattern. So when we're using a mosaic pin, what we do is we use a technique called an epoxy bolt. Now if you imagine that is the spine of my knife there, and this post here is actually our pin that we're putting through our handle scales. What we do is put a couple notches into our pin and cavitate the inside of the scale. So when we fill this with epoxy, it actually acts like a little keyway, and that epoxy, even if it breaks, prevents the scale from pulling off because there's a chunk of epoxy trapped in that gap. Now this is a blown up, obviously. If you're actually doing it, you know, your hole is going to be more about this size here, you know. And what we would use is a small Dremel bit to go in the hole and cavitate it. You don't want to come up to the surface. The surface of the hole wants to be nice and clean and fit perfect. You know, this is cutaways, sorry, but you want your hole to be fit perfect, but you just want to cavitate the inside. And again, you fill it full of epoxy glue and you're good to go. So if you're looking at your post, oh, wrong end, you just need to put a few grooves in it with a file, and I did that with a triangular file, if you can see that, and they're just a couple little grooves. That's all you really need. And each of those are going to fill up with epoxy. Again, cavitate the handle with a small Dremel burr, and that's going to fill up with epoxy. This will lock your handle tight, and that's the technique I picked up from the Canadian Knife Makers Guild back when I used to make a lot of knives. With all you new knife makers, just thought it'd be something fun to pass on. Like I said, you can come up with some pretty killer patterns by just spending a little time playing Lego for big kids.